FBI Director Kash Patel confirming over the weekend in a social media post that the Bureau is investigating what he calls large-scale fraud schemes in Minnesota.
That post comes just hours after right-wing YouTuber Nick Shirley posted a 45-minute video exposing what he claims is massive fraud among government-funded childcare programs in Minnesota. It apparently shows several empty daycares, including one with a misspelled sign. That doesn't inspire confidence. Shirley also attempted to confront the owners, the operators of those facilities. That video received praise and sparked outrage on the right, outrage over what he exposed. Vice President J.D. Vance reposted the video on X and wrote this: "This dude has done far more useful journalism than any of the winners of the 2024 Pulitzer Prizes." Adding, "What's happening in Minnesota is a microcosm of the immigration fraud in our system. Politicians like it because they get power. Welfare cheats like it because they get rich." And Republican Congressman Tom Emmer took a shot at Minnesota Governor Tim Walz in his own post. Quote, "Tim Walz sat idly by while billions were stolen from hardworking Minnesotans. What Walz refused to address for 7 years, Nick Shirley has uncovered in one day. The fraud in Minnesota is so brazen, so vast, it's impossible Walz's administration didn't know about it." That criticism of Walz was echoed by several Minnesota mayors who appeared on Fox News last week. Take a listen.
There's a little nickname for him going around Minnesota. He's the fraud father, and that's exactly what it is. These unfunded mandates, this fraud, and the shrinking government assistance to the cities, it's killing us. It's killing our taxpayers.
This has got to be laid at the feet of the people that are in charge of this state. It's like they got together with Illinois and see who could race to the bottom fastest. Illinois was heading there quicker than us, but it's like Minnesota said, hold our beer and watch what we can do. That's the feeling I get out of this, like it's a race to the bottom.
Just hours after Shirley's video began to go viral, Director Patel chimed in, writing on X in part, quote, "The FBI is aware of recent social media reports in Minnesota. However, even before the public conversation escalated online, the FBI had surged personnel to investigate resources to Minnesota to dismantle large-scale fraud schemes exploiting federal programs. We will continue to follow the money and protect children, and this investigation very much remains ongoing. Furthermore, many are also being referred to immigration officials for possible further denaturalization and deportation proceedings where eligible." Meanwhile, a spokesperson for Governor Walz responded to the criticism in a statement to Fox News, telling them, quote, "The governor has worked for years to crack down on fraud and asked the state legislature for more authority to take aggressive action. He has strengthened oversight, including launching investigations into specific facilities, one of which was already closed." The new allegations come amid a major fraud investigation into the abuse of COVID-era funding for social services. Dozens have been arrested in that investigation, many of whom are of Somali descent.
So I watched this YouTube video by Nick Shirley. It's very impressive. He goes to multiple of these daycare centers that received state funding, and they're not operating. There is no children enrolled in them, that as far as he can tell. The people he interacts with who work there are very evasive as soon as they realize what's going on. They're like, oh wait, we don't know anything. Look, I certainly want to see further verification from other journalists, left, right, and center. Let's let everyone have a crack at this to make sure the story is being presented to us accurately. So I want to withhold a little bit of judgment, but it looks real bad, really devastating. Misspelling on the sign is not a good thing. No children, and he proceeds like, "I would like to enroll my child. How do I do that?" And everyone's like, "What?"
They didn't have an answer for him.
There's no children.
Look, I didn't like the Leering Center sign either, with no N for learning. So I thought that was ridiculous for a learning center, whether it was active or inactive. That's not appropriate.
It's like the Derek Zoolander Center for kids who cannot read.
Yes, exactly.
How are they to learn how to read if they cannot even fit inside the building? Great scene.
Okay, so I don't think that's, I think, like you said, we have to proceed with caution because while I appreciate a YouTuber and somebody who's a self-proclaimed journalist, or whether he studied journalism or however, it doesn't make you the good journalist.
I don't care whether
the
he
active
studied
reporting
or not. Yeah.
And the active being in the field and vetting of sources and making sure that he pursued some of these daycare centers or entities and ties them directly to the funds that he's saying they have. I'd like to see all that information, and if he presents that fully in future docuseries that he has on his site,
he's doing the work no one else would do.
He should, and people should follow up. Now that they have the ball in hand, they can go ahead and shoot it, and New York Times take it away, right? Yeah. I'd love to see that. But two things can be true, like Somali immigrants and Other people in Minnesota could have done egregious crimes that they need to be held accountable for. And at the same time, there are people yelling to say that the administration is using this fraud scheme opportunity to pinpoint out and isolate all Somali migrants, which is not right. Those two thoughts stand firmly in my head as both accurate. I think that when we talk about how the Minnesota governor has responded, Walz, he's saying that in 2022, when he responded to Feeding Our Future, that he had a request from a judge saying that the FBI is in the middle of this investigation already and for him to stay back and that they have it under control. So he couldn't really act after 2022 in that regard with Feeding Our Future. But he's saying prior to that, the federal government is the one that eased the restrictions around pandemic era, like,
Right.
Things that people can take on that when you're businesses that are abusing the system. And it wasn't states that decided to make this so lenient to get this money and access this money. And he's like, and there was a lot going on at that time. So I take responsibility. He said, quote, he takes responsibility for anything that he needs to take responsibility for, but he wants to say that guardrails, quote, were taken off by the federal government during the pandemic. And so that made it kind of a free-for-all for a lot of people, not just in Minnesota, but he also put forward a new program, and we have to give hats off to him. If he's seeing something happening, if he's seeing the FBI get involved and knowing that we're post-pandemic by 3 years, like when we're out of it and out of the fray of it, and he's doing something. On December 12th, he put a new fraud prevention program forward, led by an FBI agent, and they're really looking into every single one of these things that have been brought forward. So why are we criticizing him for doing something? It's maybe too little too late, but everyone is there, and we all agree that anybody who committed fraud should go to jail. We appreciate any YouTuber.
Deported if possible.
Or be deported if they're committing a crime and they're a legal immigrant. I think most people agree that if you're committing a crime outside of coming to the country, you should probably get out of the country.
So I agree with you on your earlier point that I don't want to stigmatize an entire community. Anyone who broke the law should be prosecuted, should be forced to give the money back, should be sent out of the country if that's applicable. I agreed with what you said about, but racism is bad. You can't just blame everyone because they happen to have a resembling skin color of people who committed crimes. No issue there. On the Tim Walz stuff, I'm very much less sold. I think
he responded.
I think even if the federal government releasing guardrails was bad, all this COVID era spending was bad. I opposed all this grants in the first place. You're the governor of a state. You have to do a better job making sure this money, I don't care what the federal government says, falls into the wrong hands. And he is not, I don't think he's acquitting himself. I think he's in a very difficult position where he just really screwed up and there's not a lot he can do to save for it. But I also
But Minnesota wasn't the only state dealing with fraud. This is a massive, Feeding Our Future was a massive issue, but it wasn't the only state with COVID era fraud happening. You have to remember that.
Well, that I agree with.
Blame every
I'm
state
sure there
and
are
every
a lot
Republican
of other-
governor
Well,
that has
look
fraud
at
under their
states.
watch.
And,
You should.
and they should face the consequences too, but I bet we're going to find it in a lot of blue states. Blue, blue, blue. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer is in hot water after welcoming the arrival of a man who spent more than a decade as a political prisoner in Egypt. Alaa El-Fattah moved to the United Kingdom just last week after being pardoned by Egypt's president in September.
He obtained British citizenship in 2021 through his mother, but had lived in Egypt for most of his life. His move to the UK has been met with controversy after old tweets from El-Fattah went viral, leading to some calling for him to be deported.
On Friday, Prime Minister Starmer wrote on X, "I'm delighted that Alaa El-Fattah is back in the UK and has been reunited with his loved ones who must be feeling profound relief. I want to pay tribute to Alaa's family and to all those that have worked and campaigned for this moment. Alaa's case has been a top priority for my government since we came to office. I'm grateful to President Sisi for his decision to grant the pardon."
Now, El-Fattah was arrested several times when he lived in Egypt, and he had spent the better part of the last 12 years in prison. When he arrived in London on Friday, old tweets from around 2010 started to resurface. In some of the tweets, El-Fattah says he hates white people, and in another called the killing of Zionists, quote, heroic. On Monday, he apologized for his remarks, but suggested that some were taken out of context. His statement says in part, quote, "Looking at the tweets now, the ones that were not completely twisted out of their meaning, I do understand how shocking and hurtful they are. And for that, I unequivocally apologize. I particularly regret some that were written as part of an online insult battles with the total disregard for how they read to other people. I should have known better."
Many in the UK, including lawmakers, now calling for El-Fattah to be deported because of these tweets. Much of the outrage is also directed at Starmer for welcoming his arrival. The UK government has condemned the old tweets, says they were not aware of them until after he arrived in the country. That seems ridiculous to me, but Nigel Farage, leader of the UK's Reform Party, wrote a letter expressing his concern to the country's Home Secretary. He writes, the government has since suggested the Prime Minister was unaware of those comments. Unfortunately, such an admission only compounds his ineptitude. It should go without saying anyone who possesses racist and anti-British views, such as those of Mr. El-Fattah, should not be allowed in the UK. And right-wing British activist Tommy Robinson writes on X, Allah Abd El-Fattah spits in the face of our nation, our people, our weak politicians, and laughs at us. So we should, because our weakness is pathetic. It deserves to be mocked. We are governed by spineless imbeciles. So it should be clear that these tweets are not just hateful or mean or rude. They are violent. He calls for violence against Zionists. We all know that means Jews. Violence against the police. Violence against our rulers. Hatred of white people. Hate. Violence. This is radical extremism. Now, I'm for free speech, although threatening people with violence is not free speech. But Britain takes a different path. Britain is very serious about cracking down on hate speech and extremist speech. So it just seems weird to me that they would bend over backward to pull this man into a country where the things he's saying, correct me if I'm wrong, are perhaps illegal under British law, and they're bending over backwards to bring him back, and they're celebrating him, and they're talking about how great it is and he's going to be reunited with his family like it's Gandhi or something. It just tonally doesn't make sense to say, oh, we didn't know about his tweets. Well, people have been calling attention to them for years. So that does not make, you'd have to be totally moronic and incompetent to not know that. I don't believe they didn't know that. I think they're saying they didn't know because now they're in trouble. So look, maybe it's the case, to be perfectly honest, that he's a British citizen, and so they should try to get him back, even if he's reprehensible, and that's just the right thing to do. I don't know why they need to celebrate it and pat themselves on the back and say, oh, it's so wonderful, like he's some great humanitarian, he's a pro-democracy activist. No, he hates white people, he hates Jews, he hates the police, he wants violence on all these groups. This is not we shouldn't be proud of this person. That's where I really quibble with what they're doing.
Yeah, I think the things that he said online were definitely beyond, egregious. They were hateful, something that
they're violent.
Violent. We shouldn't sell, especially the thing that, like you said, when he said he wants to see people killed. Like that's obviously something that should be called attention to. I know that Keir Starmer is having a tough time in UK because a lot of people are looking at him as weak and use the word imbecile and things. There's a conservative party that thinks that they should be in leadership over there, and we know that even by him inviting and meeting with President Trump when he came over there, he wanted to show, and that was a couple months ago, the president visited the UK, that he has some alignment with the president over here to show that I can play both sides of the aisle. I can make deals come through. There's tech deals that he worked on with President Trump, and he wanted to look stronger than he actually is. And I think that some of this, and I don't know how much of his tweets were very obvious. I think when you're vetting anybody that you want to champion, you will look into their background and history. That's like a simple thing that people that are
I've heard of this guy before. I've heard, because there's been campaigns, liberal people in Britain saying, we got to free this guy. I'm like, oh, who is this guy? And you can look on his Wikipedia page and it says, he said all these things, so it's not
hard to find.
It is not a mystery. It's not that these tweets were hidden. And again, I'm not someone, resurface old tweets, get them in trouble. You said something problematic when you were 13 and now you deserve death or something. No, that's not what he did here. He evinced views that are violent and extremist.
But
and
there
bringing him home.
And there is a part of this
that
the context of me saying everything about what Starmer is experiencing in the UK right now is because the Conservative Party would like to be the next in charge and want to show more and more reasons about why this is not somebody who's on the side of the people of UK. And so this is another example. If this was obvious news that it's a slip up and a big miscalculation on the party in charge right now part, but for the conservative movement, they're kind of like, look at this. This is another example about why you guys shouldn't have voted them in office. We're telling you, because all you see is these voices stepping up saying, why did we bring this guy home? And like you said, there may be some diplomatic process that it's the right thing to do. If somebody's a political prisoner, you bring them home. But at the same time, when they're espousing hate speech, to celebrate it and for it to be available on things like Wikipedia, like you're saying, seems very silly.
I mean, like we worked to get, what was it, Bo Bergdahl, I think was his name. That was the U.S. service member who was captured after doing something dishonorable. I think he deserted or something of that nature. And we worked to get him back, even though what he did was very reprehensible. We're not celebrating him. It's the right thing to do when you have.
So the mistake was for you, the tweet saying, "Welcome back." That's the biggest mistake.
They just seem so happy about it. Yeah.
Because you also say, I mean, and there's been some egregious, we've talked about a variety of different people that have sent out some tweets or some social media posts that have, and I can't say specifically if they've threatened death on anyone, but they've been, to me, repulsive in extreme ways. And you've been like, well, we can't like take that and let that paint in someone's entire life. Well, that's usually your perspective. Yeah. So you would say that he should not be reunited with half of his family that's in the UK. He should just stay and live in exile in Egypt, or where should he go?
I don't know. I know that I'm saying that, but the UK has strict hate speech laws. I oppose them, but they do have them. So they only apply to people who say racist things against other groups. They're not going to be applied to someone who said racist things about white people and Jews, is what we're saying. There's a double standard here. A Arab Muslim extremist who evinces prejudice toward others is shown love and kindness and compassion, and yay, we got him back. Whereas someone who evinced a hatred of minorities would be jailed in Britain itself, potentially, or fined, or whatever, because they have strict hate speech laws. I think that's what people are objecting.
Yeah, and leadership's going to have to respond to this. You can say whatever
you want because we have the First Amendment. Yeah. Now, if you're not a citizen, that doesn't apply to you. If you're trying to get into the country, we can reject you. If you are the citizen of the country, then you should generally be able to return to your country of origin if you're not violating the law. Now, he might be violating the law according to Britain because they have strict hate speech laws.
Yeah.
It's just it just seems confused to me. And their excuse is they didn't know that he had said extremist things, which makes no sense because it was well publicized and well known.
Yeah. So it seems like easy to find. So I don't know. Political commentator Bill Maher and actor John Stamos seem to be in agreement that some on the left have become too fixated on President Trump.
John Stamos, that's a name we don't hear all the time anymore. It's Uncle Jesse, right?
Yeah.
All right, Maher brought up the issue on the most recent episode of his Club Random podcast. He says he's tired of people who base their whole personality around being a Trump critic. Take a look.
It is a phenomenon we have never seen before.
Right.
That one person would dominate
every
just the national
every dinner
for
every
decade.
Yeah.
But and I do think you have to fight that. Like I say, if that's your whole personality, is the first thing out of your mouth is, what are we going to do about Donald Trump? I just can't.
Now, Maher has been a frequent critic of Trump for some years, but for some have felt that he's not been quite as harsh on the president in his second term. He's joined Trump for a dinner at the White House earlier this year and said he would be glad to do so again. Maher's comments drew support from conservatives online. Businessman and radio host Bill Mitchell writes on X, "Good to see even a liberal like Maher call out the unhealthy fixation that's divided friends and families. Hardworking people want to focus on real issues, not endless hate."
Others felt that Maher's comments were hypocritical because of how frequently he himself has discussed and criticized Trump over the years. Some pointed back to comments he made in Trump's first term when Maher suggested a recession would be worth it if it meant Trump did not get reelected. Writer Art Tavana says on X, Bill Maher is literally the reason why MAGA invented the Trump derangement syndrome meme. He's the dictionary definition. He's the ground zero moment. I mean, okay, but he's changed a lot since then, and he's now a much more moderate commentator, one who I find interesting. What I think he's referring to here, you can still criticize Trump and not be Trump is your entire personality, but both,
That's saying entire personality is so funny to me.
Well, what he's referring to, I think, Bill Maher probably has dinner with fellow liberals, people who are more liberal than him, who are just so worked up with, older people. It tends to be this way. Are so worked up and so consumed by dislike of Trump or a support of Trump. There's a lot of people who feel that way too. I don't think younger people are as consumed with Trump. I think Trump is like an older person. You're devoted to liking or despising him is an older American phenomenon. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think that when you look at
like Facebook, the repository of the boomers, that's where you get all this insane anti-Trump hysteria.
About, yes. About
you don't get that on social media sites that are younger.
And if you look at Bill Maher and how much he was talking about President Trump in his first term, I think that there's a distinct difference between when Trump was president the first time and second time. The first time it was like this one-off situation that people thought, oh my gosh, when is this 4 years going to end? If you didn't like him, if you did like him, you were happy to see it. But by the time he left, there was this fatigue and we thought, okay, we'd never see him again. Good riddance, never get elected, whatever. When he got elected again, there's the same people that had all those thoughts in his first term had to grapple with the idea that half of the country, or more than half, enjoyed him as president and actually do like him or are okay with his antics enough to vote him in again. And then the conversation about berating the man every single day as your number one source and sitting at dinner tables and disassociating doesn't really land well anymore, because you are in almost like the minority at this point. You might as well have a dialogue with people who disagree with you to see what it is that they voted for and did like. And some people may realize that they got it very wrong by giving him another shot, especially if the economy or tariffs or everything doesn't go the way they want it to. Hopefully that's not the case, because it will affect us all negatively. But what Bill Maher is saying, I think, and which I agree with, is the fact that we cannot sit here and just blame every single thing the same way I said about Trump on Biden. We can't do that about Trump every single day. It's like, oh my gosh, I hate Trump, I hate Trump. Okay, so what's the plan in place for the Democrats? Now, the Democrats lost, Kamala lost the election. We have to figure out what the next steps are. But the best next steps would be to have a clear strategy. Like Gavin Newsom, I find him to be very entertaining and hilarious. And he's meeting Trump with the same energy. And I think it's very, very entertaining. But at the same time, it's very, very entertaining. At the same time, I need strategy, though. Because what the problem is that the first time when Biden won, he ran on the fact that I'm not Trump. You want to get away from being Trump. That doesn't work anymore. Trump's not even in the race. And so the more that you kind of berate him and come up with no policies, the more that we get closer to 2028 and nobody knows what the plan is. No one knows what the agenda is. The agenda is I'm not Trump. And that's not a winning message. We saw that in 2024, that wasn't enough. To say that the democracy is at stake and Trump can't win, somebody Trump-aligned can't win, that's not going to win the election. So what are the strategies? What's the next conversation? I think that's where people need to be. And hopefully what Bill Maher is referring to is that the conversation has to progress and move on and be something about what the future will look like in your eyes.
Yeah, to return to my earlier point, I don't think it's certainly not as many people as in my social circles. I think Bill Maher's social circles are where it's consumed, the liberals consumed by anti-Trump animus. Like I was in Miami a few days ago for a little vacation. Went to a bunch of bars and restaurants and clubs, talked to people, talked to young people. When it comes up that I work in media, I do a politics news show. Then they ask me about politics and about news. I think I didn't have one conversation with someone. I met a fair number of people. I had a lot of conversations. It was like, what do you think about Mamdani? What do you think about Elon Musk? What do you think about Marjorie Taylor Greene? No one was like, for or against, was like, oh my God, Trump. I'm so worried about Trump. He's so awful. He's ruining everything. What are we going to do about Trump? Or was like, I love Trump. I worship Trump. Tell me everything you know about Trump. Oh my God, he's so great. Those were just not the conversations, because I was having conversations with young people.
Yes.
Older people, I think, evince those two perspectives.
It's almost like
you know
you're scared to say a word, because you'll be like, yeah, I work in politics, and anybody who's a little bit older, but oh my God, we gotta get Trump out of it. Or yesterday, it literally happened to me. A man went on a rampage about how much he loves. He was trying to get more out of me, how much he loves Trump.
Taxi driver?
How did you know? Driver? Yes.
That was a guess.
That's correct. Yes.
It's always a
he went on a rampage. Didn't even ask me my affiliation. Was just like, you know what? And you should really leave politics or leave journalism, politics, and work for the Department of Homeland Security, because they are just doing a fantastic job. I was like, well, thank you. I don't know if I have the qualifications to work over there. I'm not really looking to change careers.
African?
No, he was an Indian man.
Indian? Okay.
Yes. You had a lot of experiences like this?
Taxi drivers who are immigrants from, I find, Africa, but also India, Middle East, are 99% Trump loving every time is what
I was so blown away. I was like, wow,
well
you really
demonstrated phenomenon.
He was like, yeah, he's doing a fantastic job. He didn't even ask me my opinion so much that he's
No, they want to
I know
tell
you love
you,
him too. Yeah,
You're right.
I know you do.
Yeah, the cure, if you're in too many circles that have Trump derangement syndrome, the cure is to take a taxi to your next
DC.
destination. Yeah, in DC.
Well, I got a spoonful of
meet with love of our president.
I was like, thank you for that. Good evening.
Does not surprise me.
Yeah, good evening.
We've all had that experience. CNN's Scott Jennings took a swipe at Georgia Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene over her split with President Trump.
Now, Scott Jennings appeared on ABC's This Week, where he argued that Greene went, quote, off the deep end after getting turned down by Trump. Let's take a listen.
Marjorie Taylor Greene becomes not just a Trump critic, but
MTG becomes a lib. I mean, that's what happened this year.
Yeah.
She got a little bit out of shape because the president wouldn't support her for a statewide office in Georgia, which she was going to lose if she had gotten into it, by the way. And so she goes off the deep end.
Jennings also downplayed the notion of a split within MAGA. Let's take a listen.
I don't think these divisions and all this fraying are as big a deal as some people make it out to be. Trump is still extraordinarily popular among Republicans. He's the strongest party boss in the modern era. And he can get his allies in Congress to do most anything he wants them to do, which is why I think in the coming year, they really ought to spend some time trying to codify, to Rick's point, his executive orders and some of the other initiatives that he's had.
The New York Times recently did a profile on Greene where she spoke about her split from Trump. She told the Times, quote, our side has been trained by Donald Trump to never apologize and never admit when you're wrong. You just keep pummeling your enemies no matter what. And as a Christian, I don't believe in doing that.
I don't think she's become a lib. She's certainly become more combative with Trump. It certainly is personal in some way. She's acting as if it's personal. So on her side, it's very personal. I don't know that it's personal for Trump. And I think that's maybe not a healthy place to be. I mean, I've said this before. If politics is very personal for you, you will not last in it. It's supposed to be the people who do it successfully for decades. It's very impersonal. Like they scream at each other on the Senate floor and they accuse each other of everything, and then they go get dinner afterwards. And it's part of now. You can say that's bad and that it's not good that there's a theatricality and a false nature to politics, but that is the reality, and it's seeming like she wasn't exactly cut out for that. I don't think she hasn't like fundamentally remade her actual political views. She thinks Trump is not doing some of the things he promised to do. I would quibble with her on some of that. On others, I do agree with her. So it's a complicated picture. On his point about there being a split within MAGA, that's where I think he was being a little overly rosy. It's true that Donald Trump totally commands the party, and it's true that the Republican members of Congress will do virtually anything he says. To his point, I don't know why they aren't working harder to make the things that Trump wants to do law. They're just doing it all via executive orders, which can be undone if there's ever a Democrat again. So that's a huge mistake. It doesn't speak to there being a split. There is a split in the commentariat right now. There's a huge split that I think we're going to get into a little bit later between Megyn Kelly, Tucker Carlson, et cetera, and other people. And how much that actually matters is unclear, sure, but we can't just gloss over that split.
Yes,
as commentators ourselves.
And Scott Jennings is a good talker, so even as I watch this, I'm like, almost convinced me there's not a split. But no, I know what's going on. I think if you watched Turning Point's conference in Phoenix that they had, America Fest,
yes,
we didn't get to talk about that together, but it was a disaster, a blank show, as people like to call it. I mean, people came up there and just aired their grievances about one another for like the first few days. And I think, from Nick Fuentes being a rising star of perhaps of MAGA, even if he is just an online person, is still representative. No matter if you agree with all or some, the things that he says will start to represent the party if he's wholly embraced by people that are looked at as party leaders or interviewed by people that are mouthpieces for the Republican Party, like a lot of people look at Tucker Carlson as. I think when you look at the economy and Trump's 36% last time I checked approval rating, and you think about the things that Marjorie Taylor Greene was saying, there's a split between what he's actually doing. When you think about the Pennsylvania farmers that voted for President Trump that were complaining over the summer about some of the actions that he's taken with tariffs and how they're affecting them, I think that that's valid criticism. So these are actual Republicans. This is the actual party, whether it's MAGA or the whole party that has to grapple with what happens after President Trump. Perhaps they liked him for his charisma. Perhaps they liked him for his abrasiveness. Perhaps they liked some of the policies that he pitched on the economy. And then perhaps none of that is being met. Then what happens to the party after President Trump? The charisma might have been the glue holding it together. Well, J.D. Vance ain't Trump. Anybody else running is not Trump. And I don't even know what it is, if it's charisma, but it's something that President Trump obviously has to people that support him that keeps the party together like glue. Nobody knows. This is the science experiment we haven't tried before.
Right.
And I think Scott Jennings understands that, but his job is to make it look good, like it's fine.
Right. It's a united and coherent political movement with Trump at its helm, but Trump will not be at its helm forever.
Exactly.
Although I guess, we're going to talk about J.D. Vance next, but if he runs for president and loses, I think Donald Trump does remain the leader of the party, even as its former, most recent presidential winner. The U.S. is announcing on Monday it will be rolling back its humanitarian aid pledge to the UN to about $2 billion, telling UN agencies in the wake of the funding cut to, quote, adapt, shrink, or die.
Now, $2 billion may seem like a lot, but it's a fraction of what the U.S. has spent in the past. This year alone, the U.S. has spent more than $3 billion, and historically, that's been as high as $17 billion.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio explained the move in a post on X, writing this: under the president's leadership, taxpayer dollars will never fund waste, anti-Americanism, or inefficiency. Today, the State Department and United Nations signed an agreement that radically reforms the way the U.S. programs, funds, and oversees unadministered humanitarian work. He continued, this new model will better share the burden of UN humanitarian work with other developed countries and will require the UN to cut bloat, remove duplication, and commit to powerful new impact, accountability, and oversight mechanisms.
As to where that $2 billion is going, the U.S. and UN will reportedly sign a series of separate memorandums of understanding with 17 countries that the U.S. has identified as priority countries. They will be able to first receive the aid, including the Democratic Republic of Congo, Ukraine, Nigeria, and Sudan. Some of the UN's top priority countries, like Afghanistan, Yemen, and Gaza, will not receive U.S. funding under the new structure. Aid for Gaza will reportedly be handled on a separate track.
I think this is a just political winner, clearly. Go out, tell the American people, we're giving less money to the UN, we're giving less U.S. taxpayer dollars to people overseas. That's just, running up the scoreboard there. That's what the American people don't want their taxpayer dollars spent overseas. We spend billions and billions and billions of dollars on overseas programs. It's not popular. Americans want it to stop. So this is fine by me. We can cut more.
So I think it's a strategy to try to reshape and cut bloat, and that's important, right? We don't want duplicated programs or money that's not being used in the right way or just goes into one fund and then gets shuffled over because it was never used in a calendar year. But when I think about shrinking these agencies, immediately I looked into who can be affected by this. And I know that it's not always like, woe is me, all the countries around the world, and it's not the U.S. job to save everybody. But there are food programs like the World Food Program and IOM that are receiving billions of dollars, and they're going to receive billions less. And then we'll see that food rations will change. We'll see that there'll be reduced medical services around the world for different countries, fewer shelters for people to stay in. And so these are immediate effects that might take place within the next year that could lead to places like Sudan, Gaza, and Haiti having, and not Gaza because now it's been moved on to a different category, but even if we don't provide the same level of funding we did there, it will quickly translate into hunger and instability in a lot of these regions. So just to say, hands off, there's nothing we can do, we're funding too much, I mean, that doesn't seem like a good strategy.
Let's just think about Gaza for a minute. I mean, this is one of the great moral crimes here. We paid for its destruction because we give Israel money to buy our weapons, and they destroyed it, and now we're going to pay to rebuild it. I don't like that. I don't like...
But which one do you not like more? I mean,
I don't like either. I don't want to blow it up only to have to rebuild it a few years later.
Right, and you've argued the point that we should consider if Israel is doing anything that was beyond retaliating for being attacked.
Well, maybe they should pay to blow it up, and then they should pay to fix it.
Then maybe we shouldn't be involved, but we can't.
I think a lot of the American people
I don't think pulling
going,
the funding
wow,
is a
thanks.
good. I mean, it just as a matter of
pull the funding now. I mean, we did pay to destroy it, so we have maybe perhaps some.
Well, then this $2 billion $2 billion fund or cutting it across the board in this moment is not the best strategy moving forward, especially when Gaza falls under that umbrella. That's what I mean. It's not. We can't. I mean, we can do it, but it's not the right thing to do.
The American people would like to pay for less destruction and then less rebuilding. That's my sense.
Fine.
Right?
Yes, I agree. I agree with that. I think that, we're talking about these efficiency reforms, but the world is facing new and unprecedented global needs due to complex issues around the globe, due to weather changes around the globe. There's several things that the UN provides funding for. And so when we think about those incidences rising and we think about the fact that America is now pulling funding, this is a bet that we're gambling on. Oh, we'll give less money and other people will give more and that'll balance the scales. And if it doesn't work, then what? We just allow the world to crumble because the US wants to be cheap in this one area that we were providing real aid for countries that are less fortunate. We're talking about Sudan, Congo, and we're just like, it doesn't matter to us. We just got to get our stuff fixed over here.
So much money. There's no plan to make them self-sufficient. It's not. I would support emergency funding. There's some crisis, right? A weather-related event or something. There's a famine. We're going to help. But it's never. It's just year after year. We have to get more food, more medical supplies. What can we build hospitals there? Can we set up trade program? They're growing something and we're develop the economy. Can we move toward a place where they're not just dependent on our aid, or is dependency on our aid preventing them from evolving to more stable market forms of meeting the needs of the people who live there? I don't know why we can't be. The permanent solution can't be America just gives you everything you need. That's not working as a system. Maybe that would be a compelling system if in response the people were so grateful that they then became politically aligned with America and our interests immediately, but that doesn't seem to be happening.
Yeah, I think that
there's still a great deal of resentment toward America in the third world and in the Middle East. And even though we're giving them billions of dollars. So, okay, maybe say thank you next time. We're yanking the aid.
So you're going down from 17 million to 2 million.
But that's the point.
Say thank you.
That is the point of the aid, right? The people who in America who are defending giving it say we're doing this to engender goodwill about America in parts of the world where there's extremists who dislike us. Okay, fine. It just seems to be that that's not working. Because there's still these extremists.
And I'm all about self-sufficiency and having an end game to the goals that we put forth in other countries. But I don't think that going from, in past years, $17 billion of aid to going forward in 2026 with $2 billion of aid is the right strategy. I think that's a dramatic. $17 billion probably was way too much. But if it's going to be $17 billion, let's say again in 2026, at least then yes, I don't mind a strategy. If Marco Rubio said the president and I sat down and talked about these hospitals we can build, this training program we can do. That's an awesome idea. That is a great way forward to talk about stability in regions that could actually benefit themselves and have people that live there, train there, working there. But taking away more than half of the funding from past years, or even a third, of the funding is wild, because there's people that are definitely going to starve and get hurt. And we talked about this when Doge made a lot of these cuts that didn't become
right. And
permanent.
I made many of the same arguments.
Yeah, and they're like, oh, well, I don't know about this. All these people getting hurt. Why can't other people jump in? It's like, okay, but if we just knee-jerk react to things and say, well, the president doesn't want to spend money there, we're not considering that there are people that are actually relying and going to live based off aid that they thought was coming in the immediate next few months and years that will no longer be here. And this program's put in place in this organization. So oversight is one thing. And I think that's what we can do better. Oversight to make sure that every dollar is going to the right place. But completely just cutting funding this dramatically just because we want to and want other nations to jump in. I think it doesn't have to happen so abruptly. We can have conversations with other nations and figure out how they're going to implement and how we can wean away what we've already promised and have them jump in a little more without just pulling it all away and saying, y'all figure it out.